My name is Lacey Drummond. I'm 31 years old, and the moment I understood exactly who my mother was, I was standing in my own doorway, wet hair, no makeup, wearing a shirt that was 2 sizes too big, and she was on the other side of it, asking me for $3,000. I want to tell you how we got there, because it didn't start at that door. It started a long time before that. And if you want to understand why I didn't move aside and let her in, why my hands stayed on the frame and my feet stayed where they were, you have to understand everything that came before that Tuesday afternoon. You have to understand the kind of quiet that a house can have when the wrong person is the loudest one in it. Before I go back to the beginning, I just want to say, if you're already here, if something in that first sentence already made you shift in your seat a little, hit like, subscribe so you don't miss the rest of this, and share it with someone who needs to hear a story about finally seeing something clearly. I'm going to keep going now. Let me take you back. I grew up in Cookeville, Tennessee. Small city, the kind of place where everybody knows which family you came from, and that information does half your introducing for you. I came from the Drummonds, which meant I came from my mother, Renee. And what that meant, what it actually meant, underneath the surface version of it, I spent about 22 years figuring out. My mother raised 2 kids mostly by herself after my father left when I was 6. I don't say that to give her credit she doesn't deserve, or to take credit away that she does. It's just the fact of it. He left, and she stayed, and she waitressed at the same diner on Highway 70 for 16 years, until her knees wouldn't let her anymore. That part is real. That part I have never argued with. What I would argue with, what I spent years trying not to argue with, was the way the love in that house had a direction. It flowed one way mostly, toward my brother Tyler. He was 4 years younger than me, and he was easier, and my mother understood him in a way I don't think she ever quite understood me. Or maybe she just stopped trying to understand me before she ran out of trying. I'm still not completely sure which one it was. Here's what I know. When I was 9 years old, I broke my wrist at school. The nurse called my mother 3 times. She didn't come. I sat in that nurse's office for 4 hours. I remember the smell of it, something like antiseptic and old coffee, until the woman who lived 2 houses down from us came to pick me up instead. My mother was asleep. She hadn't heard the phone. That's what she said. I believed her for a long time. I had to. What I know now is that I built my whole personality around that afternoon, around being the kid who could handle waiting, around not being the kind of child who needed too much, made too much noise, cost too much energy. I became the easy one, the one who figured things out, the one who didn't call 3 times. And I want to pause right here, because if you've ever learned to be low maintenance, not because you are, but because you were taught that needing things was the fastest way to lose what little you had, if you know what it's like to ration your own hunger, I think you'll understand everything that comes next. If this is already landing somewhere inside you, go ahead and hit like, subscribe so you don't miss where this goes, and send it to someone who needs to hear it. Now let me keep going. I paid for college myself. Not mostly myself, entirely. Tennessee Tech on a partial academic scholarship, which I had worked for with the specific intensity of someone who knew there was no backup plan. I waited tables on weekends and did data entry for a property management company on weeknights, and I graduated in 4 years with $11,000 in loans that I paid off in 38 months. I kept a spreadsheet. I still have it somewhere. I say all of this not to perform resilience. I'm so tired of performing resilience. But because you need to know that when I crossed that stage at graduation, my mother and Tyler were in the stands, and afterward my mother said, and I am quoting her exactly, "I always knew you'd figure it out." Not, "I'm proud of you." Not, "Look what you did." Just, "I always knew you'd figure it out." Like I had solved a minor inconvenience. Like I had found my keys. Tyler came up to me after and hugged me and said, "That's a big deal, Lace." He was 15 and he meant it, and I loved him for it. I still do. The person who actually showed up for me that day was Dana. Dana Kowalczyk, who I had met in the first week of sophomore year when we were assigned to the same study group for a class neither of us wanted to be in. She drove 3 hours from where she was doing a clinical rotation to be in those stands. She brought a poster. It said Doctor. Drummond, eventually, in glitter letters, and the glitter got all over my graduation gown, and I laughed harder than I had in months. Dana is the kind of person who shows up. Not because she doesn't have other things to do, because she decides showing up is the thing she does. I want you to hold on to Dana. She matters. My relationship with my mother moved in cycles. There were years where things were okay. Okay in the way that a door that's slightly off its hinges is okay if you don't open it too fast. I moved to Nashville after college for a job at a hospital network, and the distance helped. I called on Sundays. I came home for holidays. I did what you do when you are still hoping that the person will eventually become who you need them to be. And then 2 years before the accident, something shifted. Not one thing. It never is one thing. But there was a moment that I keep coming back to, a moment that crystallized everything. I had been laid off. The hospital had done a round of cuts and my position was eliminated. I called my mother the same day. I was in my car in the parking lot of a Walgreens because I didn't want to cry inside the building. And I called her because when everything breaks down, you call your mother. That's the programming. It goes deep. She picked up. I told her. And her first question, her first question was, "Were you having problems there? Did something happen with someone?" Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "What do you need?" Just, "What did you do?" I said no, it was a budget thing, a whole department, it wasn't personal. She said, "Well, you always land on your feet." And then she asked me if Tyler had mentioned anything about the transmission on his truck, because he'd been having trouble, and she wanted to know if I knew anything about repair costs in Nashville. I sat in that parking lot for 11 minutes after we hung up. I counted. I don't know why I counted, but I did. And when I finally started the car, something had quietly closed inside me. Not slammed, just closed. The way a door closes when the house has gone still. I didn't stop calling on Sundays, not yet, but I stopped expecting anything to be there when she picked up. That was the beginning of understanding. The accident, and what she posted after it, was just the confirmation. The accident happened on a Thursday evening in October. I was driving home from work on I-65, the stretch just south of downtown Nashville where the lanes narrow and everyone acts like the rules are suggestions. A pickup truck rear-ended me at about 45 miles an hour. I didn't see it coming. One moment I was thinking about what I was going to make for dinner, and then there was the sound, this enormous, flat sound. Nothing like what you imagine a car accident sounds like. And then I was on the shoulder with my hazards on, and my hands were shaking, and I couldn't figure out why I couldn't lift my left arm. Fractured collarbone, 3 bruised ribs, a concussion mild enough that they let me go home, serious enough that I wasn't supposed to drive for 2 weeks or stare at screens for longer than 20 minutes at a stretch. Tyler called from the ER waiting room. He stayed on the phone with me for 2 hours that night, and I want to be clear about that. Tyler was there. In the way that he could be, he was there. He called our mother. I know he called her because he told me he did. I know she knew because the post went up at 9:14 the next morning. A photo of her backyard garden, the tomatoes she tends with a consistency she never applied to anything involving me, and a caption that said, "Woke up to the best Tennessee morning. Coffee, birds, no drama. Finally some peace," with a prayer hands emoji. I want you to think about what it takes to write that. To sit down the morning after your daughter has been in a car accident. Your daughter who called you from a Walgreens parking lot when she lost her job. Who called on Sundays. Who came home for Christmas even when coming home cost her something. And to open Facebook and type the words, "Finally some peace," and feel like that was the right thing to put into the world. I have thought about it for months. I have turned it over in therapy, in my journal, at Dana's kitchen table at 11 o'clock at night. And what I keep coming back to is this. She didn't post it to hurt me. She posted it because she wasn't thinking about me at all. And somehow, that is worse. I want to ask you something right now, and I mean this genuinely. Have you ever realized that someone's indifference hurt you more than their cruelty would have? That being forgotten is a different kind of wound than being attacked? Drop that in the comments. I read every single one of them, and I want to know if you've been in that place, because I think more people have than ever say so out loud. Dana screenshotted the post within the first hour. She knew before I even asked her, that Renee would delete it eventually, that there would be a version of events where it never happened, or was taken out of context, or was misread by people who didn't understand her. Dana saved it without telling me she was saving it. She just did it. That's the thing about Dana. She thinks 3 moves ahead when it comes to protecting the people she loves, and she does it so quietly you almost don't notice until you need the thing she already prepared. She showed me the screenshot 6 days after the accident, sitting on her couch with the floral throw blanket she keeps specifically for when I'm there. I'm convinced she bought it with me in mind, though she's never said so. And she had the look on her face of someone delivering news they have been dreading. She handed me her phone. She said, "Before you see it, I already screenshotted it." I read it twice. Then I looked out her window at the parking lot of her apartment complex, and I sat with it for a moment that felt much longer than it probably was. "She knew," I said. That was the whole sentence. Just, she knew. Dana said, "Yes." I said, "Delete it from your phone. I don't want to look at it again." She didn't delete it. I found that out later, and I am grateful every single day that she didn't listen to me. The weeks that followed were the strangest kind of quiet I have ever lived in. I was home, healing, moving carefully around my own apartment like a guest in a place I didn't want to disturb. My collarbone was in a brace for the first 4 weeks, and I slept sitting up, which is its own specific misery. I watched more television than I had in years. I made a lot of tea. I had long phone calls with Dr. Holloway, my therapist, who had been seeing me every week for 18 months by then. In those sessions, I kept saying I was fine. I kept saying the accident was the physical part, and I was managing the physical part, and the other thing, the post, was something I was processing. Dr. Holloway would look at me through the video call and say, "Tell me what processing feels like right now." And I would describe something that sounded reasonable and composed, and she would nod. And then she would ask a question that took the floor out from under me. She asked me once, if a friend called you the morning after their accident and you didn't know about it, and then you found out they'd been in the ER the night before, what would you do? I said I'd drive to them. I'd show up. She said, "I know you would." That was all she said. She didn't need to say the rest. There was one night, about 3 weeks into the recovery, where I almost called my mother. It was past midnight, and I was awake because sleeping upright means you're never really asleep, and the apartment was very dark and very quiet, and I felt the particular loneliness of being injured and alone in a way that I think is different from regular loneliness. It's more animal. It's the kind that makes you reach for whoever was supposed to take care of you, regardless of whether they ever actually did. I had my phone in my hand. I had her number pulled up. I put the phone down on the nightstand, and I made myself say out loud, in the dark, to nobody, "She knew about the accident. She posted that anyway." I said it out loud because I have a rule for myself, a rule I built out of surviving my own childhood, that I do not lie to myself. I came from a house where things were constantly being renamed and reframed, where cruelty got called honesty, and neglect got called independence, and a mother who didn't come to the nurse's office got called a mother who trusted her daughter to handle things. I learned early that the only protection I had against that distortion was my own clear sight. When I name something, I don't unsee it. I put the phone down. I didn't call. Tyler came 10 days before Renee did. He texted from the parking lot. "Hey, in Nashville for a job. You want company?" And I said yes because I love my brother, and because I am, at 31, still working on the part of myself that flinches at the idea of saying no to the people I love. He brought gas station chips and a six-pack of something I don't drink, which is exactly Tyler. We watched something stupid on my TV, and he made me laugh about a job site disaster involving a duct fitting and a very surprised homeowner. And for 2.5 hours, he was just my brother. Just the person who called me from the ER and stayed on the line and said, "That's a big deal." Lace, at my graduation when nobody else did. And then, at my kitchen table, with the chip bags between us, he said it. She didn't mean it the way it sounded. I looked at him for a long moment. Tyler, she knew about the accident. I know, she processes weird. She posted it publicly, with an emoji. He looked at the table. His jaw moved slightly, the way it does when he's working something out that he hasn't finished working out yet. Then, things are tight for her right now, financially. I just want you to know that because I heard the shape of what was coming before it arrived. I picked up my water glass. I said, very evenly, "I love you. You can come back anytime you want, but this conversation is done." He nodded. He didn't argue. He hugged me at the door, longer than usual, the kind of hug that means something he doesn't have the language for yet. And then he was gone. I stood in the hallway after he left and I thought, she sent him first. She sent him to see if the door was open. 3 days later in therapy, Dr. Holloway asked me what I would do if my mother reached out directly. I said I didn't know. She said, "You do know. You've been preparing for this for 18 months. I said, "Knowing and doing are different things." She said, "Yes. Tell me what the difference feels like right now." I went home from that session and I opened my journal and I wrote a list. Not what to say, just what I would not unsee. 2 columns. What happened and what I told myself instead. I filled 3 pages. Then Renee knocked. It was a Tuesday. Early afternoon, the kind of October light that comes in low and sideways and makes everything look a little more significant than it is. I had just gotten out of the shower. My hair was damp and I was in the Olive Henley, the oversized one I'd been living in for weeks, bought a size up when I still had the collarbone brace. And I was about to make lunch and I was not dressed for anything except getting through the day. 3 knocks, soft. A pause between the second and the third. I knew that knock. I have known that knock my entire life. It is the knock of someone who wants to seem like they're not sure they should be there, while being completely sure they're going to stay. I stood in my hallway for a moment. I looked at the door, and then I opened it, because not opening it was never really an option. Not because I owed her entry, but because I needed to see it. I needed to see her standing there, on the other side of the choice I had already made, so that the choice would be real. She was smaller than I remembered. That happens sometimes, I think, when you stop being afraid of someone. They lose a few inches. She was wearing a floral blouse, the kind that signals effort without admitting to it, and a beige cardigan, and she had her canvas tote bag over her shoulder with the strap worn thin. The tote bag made something settle in my chest. She had come prepared to stay a while. "Lacey, honey," she said, "I came to check on you." There's a thing that happens when your mother calls you honey in a soft voice after a long absence. Something in your body responds before your mind catches up. It is not weakness. It is just the animal part of you, the part that was wired before you had any say in the wiring, recognizing the voice that was supposed to mean safety. I felt it. I want to be honest about that. I felt the pull of it, the old current, the one that had been running under everything my whole life. And then I felt something else, something steadier. "How's your shoulder?" she asked. "Healing," I said. I did not move aside. She shifted the tote bag strap. Her eyes did the thing they do, the softening, the slight wetness at the edges that isn't quite tears, but is positioned close enough to function like them. "I know you saw that post," she said. "I want you to know that was a bad moment. I'd had a hard week and I just needed to put something positive out there. I wasn't thinking." "You knew about the accident," I said. Not loudly, just the fact of it, placed between us like something that had been sitting in my pocket for 3 months. She blinked. "I know. I felt terrible. I really did, Lacey. Can we talk?" she said. "Can I come in and we just—" "No," I said. The word landed quietly. She blinked again. "What did you come here for, Mom?" Here is the moment I want to sit in for just a second, before I tell you what she said next. Because this is the part that I have turned over more times than anything else. Not what she asked for. I'll get to that. But the moment just before. The moment where she was standing on my doorstep and I was standing in my doorway, and the distance between us was about 2 feet and about 30 years simultaneously. I had spent so much of my life trying to earn the right version of her, the one who would show up, the one who would ask if I was okay before she asked about Tyler's truck. I had been 9 years old in a nurse's office for 4 hours telling myself there was a good explanation. I had been 26 in a Walgreens parking lot, counting minutes, still calling. I had called on Sundays. I had come home for Christmas. I had been the easy one, the capable one, the one who figured things out, for so long that it had become the whole story of who I was. And standing in that doorway, I understood something I had been circling for years. She was never going to give me what I had been waiting for. Not because she was a monster, but because she genuinely did not know she owed it to me. In her version of the story, I had always been fine. I had always figured it out. She had given me exactly what I needed by leaving me alone to become who I was. She believed that. If that hit you somewhere, if you've ever been someone's proof that they did fine, when the truth was that you did fine in spite of them, hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't yet. What I'm about to tell you is the part that changed everything. Something closed in her face. The softness turned off. Not slowly, but like a porch light switching off. Something more familiar replaced it. "I need help," she said. Her voice shifted into the register I had known my whole life. The one that was simultaneously an ask and a statement of what I owed her for the asking. "Tyler told you things are tight. I'm 3 months behind on rent, Lacey. They're threatening to—" "How much?" I said. She paused. I think the directness surprised her. "3,000. If I could just—" "No," I said. Her jaw tightened. A small movement, but I have been reading that jaw my whole life. "I came here in good faith." "No, you didn't," I said. "You sent Tyler first to see if the door was open, and when he told you it wasn't closed all the way, you drove 2 hours and put on that blouse and came to finish what he started. I'm not saying that to be mean. I'm saying it because it's true, and because I don't have anything left to spend on pretending." Her eyes went hard. The wet edges dried up completely. "You have always been so—" "I know," I said. I meant it. I have always been so. I have always been the difficult one, the cold one, the one who takes everything the wrong way, the one who could never just let things go. I had heard every version of that sentence. I knew all the endings. "I'll tell Tyler I said hi," I said, and I closed the door. I stood in my hallway with my hand flat against the door, and I breathed. One breath, then another. My left hand, the one with the fading yellow bruise near the wrist, was pressed against the wood, and I stayed there for a moment, just feeling the solidity of it. The door was closed. I had closed it. My feet had stayed where they were. I was not crying. I was not triumphant. I was something that didn't have a clean name yet. Something that felt, more than anything, like the physical sensation of putting down something heavy that you have been carrying for so long You forgot it wasn't part of your body. I texted Dana. She came. I didn't let her in. She asked for money. 3 seconds later, Dana. I'm coming over. I sat down at my kitchen table. The same table where Tyler had said she processes weird. Where I had eaten lunch alone for weeks. Where I had written the list in 2 columns the night before. I opened my journal to that list. I read both columns slowly. What happened? What I told myself instead. Then I turned to a new page and I wrote a single line at the top. What it actually was. I didn't write anything underneath it yet. I just sat with the question. I let it be a question. Outside, the October light was still coming in low and sideways, still making everything look more significant than it was, except that now I wasn't sure it was wrong about that. Maybe things were exactly as significant as they looked. Maybe I had just spent 31 years being told they weren't. Dana arrived 40 minutes later, still in her work scrubs, lanyard swinging, a paper bag from the Thai place I love in one hand. She had come straight from work. She had gotten the text and left. That's the thing about Dana. She doesn't ask if you need her. She just comes. She didn't knock the way my mother had knocked. She knocked the way Dana knocks. 3 times, fast, no drama, certain of her welcome. I opened the door before she finished. We stood in the doorway for a second and she looked at my face and I looked at hers, and she said, "Food first, then everything." I said, "Okay." We sat at my kitchen table and we ate and I talked, and somewhere in the middle of it, somewhere between the pad CU and the part where I told her about the tote bag strap worn thin and what it had felt like to see it, I started to cry. Not the sharp, sudden kind, the slow kind. The kind that means something has been waiting a long time and has finally been given permission. Dana put her hand over mine on the table, and she didn't say anything. She didn't try to fix it or reframe it or tell me it was going to be okay. She just stayed. And that specific act of staying, of not filling the silence with anything except presence, was the thing that finally made me feel it. I was not alone in this. I had never been alone in this. I had just been looking in the wrong direction for the person who was there. The weeks after that Tuesday had a different texture to them. Not easier exactly, more honest, like when you've been squinting at something for a long time and you finally put on the right glasses. The world isn't less complicated, it's just in focus. Dana came back twice that week, not because I asked her to, because she decided to. She brought food the first time and nothing the second time, just herself. And we sat on my couch and she told me about a patient she'd been working with, and I told her about a dream I'd had where I was back in that nurse's office at 9 years old, except this time I just got up and walked out. And she said, "I think that's your brain filing something." I think she was right. Dr. Holloway, in our session that Friday, asked me how I felt now that the moment had actually happened. The moment we had been, in some sense, preparing for since I started seeing her. I thought about it for a while before I answered. I said, "I don't feel vindicated. I thought I would. I feel tired, and underneath the tired there's something else, but I can't find the word for it yet." She said, "That's okay. You don't need the word yet. You just need to know it's there." I kept returning in those weeks to the image of my mother's face when I said no the second time. Not the anger that came after. I had expected the anger. I had cataloged the anger. I had a whole archive of her anger. But the split second before it. The moment where something moved behind her eyes that was not performance. Something that looked, briefly, like grief. I have thought about that look a lot. I don't think it was grief for me specifically. I think it was grief for the version of this she had constructed. The version where she came to the door and I was so relieved to see her that I stepped aside and made tea, and by the end of the afternoon we had arrived at something that looked like reconciliation. and the money was just a practical matter we had dealt with along the way. I think she had believed that version right up until I said the first no. I am not saying this to be cruel to her. I am saying it because understanding the version she believed in is the only way I could stop being angry at her for not living in mine. I went back to work 6 weeks after the accident. My first day back, I drove the same stretch of I-65 and I did not have a panic attack, which I had been quietly afraid I would. I gripped the steering wheel a little tighter than usual through the narrow section, and then I was through it, and Nashville opened up around me and I thought, still here. The hospital felt different when I walked back in, or maybe I was different and the hospital was the same. My colleague Priya had left a small succulent on my desk with a note that said, "Welcome back, we missed your calm." I stood at my desk for a moment holding that note, thinking about the word calm and what it cost to be the calm one, and whether it was possible to be genuinely calm instead of performatively calm, and whether I was getting any closer to knowing the difference. I thought I might be. About 2 months after the door, Tyler called. Not a text, a call. It was a Sunday, which is when I used to call my mother, and I wondered if he'd chosen that day on purpose or if it was just coincidence. With Tyler, it's hard to know. He asked how I was doing. I told him. He asked about work. I told him that too. And then there was a pause, the kind Tyler uses when he's building up to something. And he said, "I've been thinking about what you said, about how you knew why she came." I waited. "I think you were right," he said. "I think I knew too. I didn't want to know." That was the whole thing. That was all he said about it. But I understood what it cost him to say it, because I know my brother, and I know that the way he loves our mother is not the way I was able to love her. It's a love that has never had to survive disappointment the way mine did. For him to say, "I think I knew too," was the equivalent of a much longer speech from anyone else. I said, "I know. I love you, Tyler." He said, "Yeah, I love you too, Lace." We talked for 40 minutes after that about nothing important. His truck, a show I'd been watching, a memory we both had of a road trip we took when he was 8 and I was 12, and our mother had actually been present for a whole weekend in a way that felt, at the time, like proof that she could be. We talked about that memory without either of us saying what we were both thinking, which was, that one was real. That one we get to keep. I never heard from my mother again after the doorstep. No call, no letter, nothing through Tyler. The rent situation resolved itself. I know this because Tyler mentioned months later that she had gotten some assistance through a church program and found more hours at the deli. I did not feel responsible for that resolution. I also did not feel glad she was struggling. I felt, mostly, nothing in the direction of her. And learning to recognize that nothing is neutral rather than as numbness took longer than I expected. What I did do, about 3 months after the door, was write something. Not to her, not addressed to her, not sent anywhere. Just written, in my journal, on the page that still had that single unfinished line at the top. What it actually was. And I filled it in. Not in anger, not in the careful language of therapy, though therapy had given me the tools to do it. Just in plain words, the way you'd explain something to a person you trusted completely. 2 words, that was all. There you are. My name is Lacey Drummond. I'm 31 years old, and right now I'm sitting at that kitchen table with a cup of coffee that's gone slightly cold because I kept talking instead of drinking it, which is exactly the kind of thing I do now, apparently, because I'm too busy being present to remember the practical things. And the October light is coming through the window again, the low, sideways kind, and I'm not squinting at it anymore. I am not at peace because everything worked out. I'm at peace because I stopped waiting for it to. I think about the 9-year-old in the nurse's office sometimes. I talk to her, not out loud, just in the way you hold someone in your mind when you want them to know something. I tell her, "You didn't figure it out because no one was coming. You figured it out because that's who you are. And those are different things. One of them belongs to you. She waited 4 hours. She's been waiting a long time. What it actually was. A mother who was handed a child she didn't know how to love the way that child needed, and who, rather than learn, decided the child was the one who needed to change. A woman who had been failed herself, in her own childhood, in her own invisible ways, and who passed that failure forward with the specific confidence of someone who has never been asked to examine it. Not a monster, not a villain, a person who chose, again and again, the path of least self-reflection, and whose daughter paid the ongoing cost of that choice. I wrote it all out, 3 pages, front and back, and at the very end I wrote one sentence that wasn't about her at all. I wrote, "I am not the easy one because no one was paying attention. I am the capable one because I decided to be." I showed it to Dana the next time she came over. She read it at my kitchen table, the same table where all of this had happened, and when she finished, she looked up at me and said, "There you are. I think she can stop now." Before I go, I want to ask you something, and I mean this. I'm not asking it to fill time before the end. I'm asking it because it's the thing I kept asking myself through all of this, the question underneath all the other questions. Have you ever had to close a door on someone you still loved? Not because you stopped loving them, but because keeping it open was slowly making you someone you didn't want to be. Have you ever had to grieve the parent or the person you needed while they were still alive? If you have, leave it in the comments. Tell me as much or as little as you want. I read every single one, and I mean that. You are not the only one who has sat in a hallway with your hand on a door, trying to figure out what the right thing is. If this story stayed with you, if any part of Lacey's story felt like something you've carried too, hit like, subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and share it with someone who might need to hear that closing a door isn't the same as giving up. Sometimes it's the most loving thing you can do. For them, maybe. Definitely for yourself. I'll see you in the next one.